Welcome to Grief Uprooted, a podcast dedicated to sharing your grief stories. Together, we embark on the mystery of one's grief journey as they learn to live, heal, and be courageous in a world rooted in trauma. Join myself, Christine, in an open discussion to help you uproot the grief in all our lives. I am an award-winning author, professional speaker, and humanitarian in the field of grief and trauma. I want you to be part of the discussion. Welcome back to Grief Uprooted. I'm your host, Christine Dernederlanden. Every time I say thank you for showing up, sometimes I wonder if you wonder why I say thank you. That's because I know how hard it is to show up for yourself. Being reminded of grief in all its forms can be really difficult. So I just want to extend a huge thank you to you for tuning in today. I want to thank you for all your comments, all your support on social media, and thank you for tuning in to however you listen to your podcasts. I appreciate you, and it is you, for you, the reason that I am here. Today, my guest, Darryl McCullough, he really he takes you on a journey that I didn't expect. And that's the one thing I love about this podcast. It's not like I can script it. It's not like I can say, hey, I interviewed this person and this is what they shared. It isn't like that. On Grief Uprooted, it's raw, it's real. And what you're hearing is what I'm hearing for the very first time. I purposely ask people not to share their story with me until we're live. And that's because the sharing of one's grief story is an honor. It isn't something that I take lightly. Somebody having that ability to be vulnerable and share their story, it's a huge honor to me, a huge honor. So Darryl, when was not what I expected. And what I want to say to that is, have you ever been at the mall and especially at Christmas time, you see people walking by and you wonder, like, I wonder what their story is. I wonder who's with them at Christmas time. I wonder if they've experienced grief. Well, Darryl McCullough, he really has 30 years in experience of marketing communication. He's grown some major firms. He now runs and operates his own uh, CEO, chairman, president of a 2012 Global Agency of the Year, recognized leader in the marketing of communication, influencer, experiential marketing, you name it. Out of all of this, behind this man, he's the author of two children's books that dive into topics you would never expect. As a gay man who openly came out not until he was 28, he really talks about the struggles he had, that acceptance of even his body image, and how we struggle, each of us struggle with that acceptance of who we are, the body we were given, the so much of it, the bullying that takes place when we don't quite fit in when we were children. This episode, I just really, really appreciate how Darryl was able to take me really on a journey to an understanding of how he came to creating these two amazing books. From the book he started when he was a child at 13, and his mother kept it for over 40 years, and he found it in his childhood bedroom and then decided to publish it. Sometimes we see people and we draw a conclusion. And sometimes that conclusion is not what you expect. Darryl's a very professional man who I had a chance to get behind that professionalism and really meet a vulnerable, amazing gay man. He taps into the LGBTQ plus community and he brings such a heartful, warmth message to everyone, to everyone. We touch on suicide. We touch on all the heavy topics But Darryl has this ability to do it in a way that brings warmth, comfort, and healing. Let's go. Let's meet Darryl. Welcome back to Grief Uprooted. I'm so excited today to have Darryl McCullough. Um, this is a little bit of a different grief perspective, I think. One that I think a lot of us challenge or encounter more on a daily basis when we think about it. But we're going to meet Darryl first and really explore what brought him to write an amazing story, actually, two amazing books. The first one is Chubby the Bear. And the second, the story of Tree and Cloud. I'm really focused on this chubby bear. I might have even got the title wrong here, but I'm in love with the character. So before we continue, I want to introduce you to Darryl. Hello, welcome, and thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Christine. It is Chubby the Bear's big choice.
The big choice. Yes, see, and that I've fallen in love with this little fuzzy character. Um, and so what I want to do first is I know that everybody that's tuned in today, and thank you for joining us today, we always like to share our grief story. I believe that sharing your grief story is actually an honor. So I am so curious what has brought you to writing these two books. So I would love to know your first experiences with grief and how this all came about.
Well, my first in-depth experience with grief is really the heart of my first book, which is indeed the story of Tree and Cloud.
Mm,
And I have to go back to junior high school.
wow.
I was in junior high school and went to a public school, had a really brilliant English teacher, and the class assignment was to write a parable, which
Mm,
is an extended metaphor common in the Bible, but used in storybooks and
yeah.
other things. At that time, I had just lost my dear cousin to suicide.
Ah,
He had killed himself, and I, as a young teenager, was just devastated. I didn't understand. I had no answers. I had a lovely Irish family that didn't talk about feelings. So we obviously knew what happened. We went through the funeral process and everybody privately grieved, but no one talked about the act of suicide or what happened to my cousin. So clearly I was grappling with this story or with this truth,
mhm.
and I had this assignment to write a parable for my class. So I wrote about grief. And
Wow.
I said, you know what? If I could write a story that would explain death to someone my age or younger, wouldn't that be a nice metaphor and a helpful thing for me and for others? So I got out paper, a crayon, pack of crayons, and drew a story
Wow.
to help me understand what happened to Scott and where he went and
So
where he
how
was
old were you?
now.
So how old were you at that
I
time?
guess I was about 13.
Wow. And to approach that and go, I'm gonna, because suicide is something like with the grief of suicide, what I've seen in my practice and my experiences, it's really silenced. Like we're not gonna talk about it. So for you to be 13 and decide, well, I'm gonna put, crayon to paper and see, I'm gonna write this book. Wow. What
So
happens
I
next?
wrote it, and like a school assignment, I made it pretty and submitted it to the teacher, who loved it and gave it back with a very good grade. I still have that book somewhere. I found it. But what happened was, fast forward 40 years later, my mother was dying of cancer,
Mm,
and I was trying to spend as much time. I live in Los Angeles now, but my family's in Pennsylvania, and I was going back and forth to spend as much time, long weekends and things, with my parents as possible, to cherish that and those end of days. I was able to hold her hand when she passed. My father was holding her head, singing to her, and I'll always cherish that last moment. I have a big family sibling that was fortunate enough, and I say fortunate because it was a blessing to be able to be there when she passed. Um, and I'll never forget that moment, nor will I ever not cherish that and just revere that moment. It's truly a blessing. But after that, I was up in my school childhood bedroom, clearing out my desk and the desk that I wrote that book. In my top drawer, my mom had organized, when she was still healthy, she had organized a couple of my old kind of childhood things. On the
Mm.
top was this little placard, a little sign that said, "Fear not, I am always with thee," the Bible verse. Underneath that was this crayon written book
Mm.
about death. She had saved that for 40 years
Wow.
and left it for me to remind me that this was happening to her. So
Yeah.
she had the forethought and the kind of the beautiful kind of soul to pay that story forward. I mean, who
Yeah.
saves a childhood book for 40 years? Your mother does, of course she does.
Yeah.
But not only did she save it, she left it for me. She knew that would help my healing, and underneath it was report cards and other things that she just wanted me to have. That touched me so deeply, and that was 9 years ago. That touched me so deeply that I knew I had to do something with that story.
Yeah.
And of course, it wasn't perfect. It was illustrated in crayon. It was just, it was what a 13-year-old would do in a junior high English class. So I rewrote the story. I added more depth and context to it. I set it in California. My mother loved coming to visit. She loved the California oak trees
Yeah.
and the coastal breezes. So I set it on a hillside overlooking, the ocean, and I knew that that would just touch her. And I had my aunt Marianne Smith, her sister-in-law, illustrate it.
Nice.
My aunt's a famous nature painter, so she did these paintings that are just glorious.
They are.
It,
I
it
fell in
just
love
it's
with
so moving. I mean,
them.
so that's the story, and it's born out of my grief over 40 years. So it has such depth and dimension that it's really been touching not just children, but people of all ages. And, this story about a tree who, if you know California oak trees, they live to be hundreds of years old.
Yeah.
And in this tree's older years, she meets the friend of her life,
Yeah.
happens to be a puddle.
Mm.
And the tree and the puddle become friends. The puddle passes, and I won't reveal all the glory of the story, but the metaphor of the puddle becoming a cloud and living on is what gave me as a child hope and relatability to where our spirit goes after we die or after the body dies.
Yeah.
And setting the story in nature grounds it in something so much more universal and bigger than just even the human form.
Yeah.
Setting a story about the circle of life
Yeah.
in nature gives you opportunity to talk about all of the passing of life in nature that happens all the time, and that is part of what brings us new life and brings us the ability to tell stories like this and to pay it forward and to kind of have new growth.
And that's
So
what's so beautiful. Like you're making my eyes tear.
uh,
Um, Everybody knows I love to cry out there. It's just when you hear these stories, they hit your heart because I can so relate to it, but also I love witnessing the change in you. And what I mean by that is like just seeing how your mom's death brought you to this other place. And that's why it's called Grief Uprooted and Grief to Growth, because people sometimes just don't get the opportunity to see how their grief can take them to another depth of being a human being, of seeing things and their perspective changes. And that's what I love, that concept of that puddle then turning into this cloud and, transcending really. And it's like water bugs and dragonflies and uh, butterfly.
Caterpillars to
Yeah,
butterflies.
caterpillar to butterfly. But I love the concept you've used because, it also gives us that ability to look at the clouds, right? And have that connection. Um, and so many times these stories are written for children, but I can't tell you how many at Roberts Press, like we carry over 500 different resources on grief and how many are ordered for adults. And it's because we can relate. We can go, yeah, that I can connect to that.
I can't tell you the number of people that have bought a dozen copies to send
Mhm.
in response to a death in their family. And they said, I want each of my family members to have this book because they want to give a meaningful tool, not just a Hallmark card. I mean, I love a good card. My mother loved a good card. She sent a card
Yeah.
for every occasion. And I've continued to follow suit. But to send a book that can live on and to potentially change someone's outlook
Yeah.
or give someone hope again in a dark moment is just so meaningful. So, for $20, you can send a book
Yeah.
that's going to live on someone's coffee table for the next 20 years. And
Yeah.
that's really a touching statement. And to be able to give someone a metaphor
Mhm.
that takes sadness into hope and to look at that, feel that breeze and to say, hey,
Yeah.
mom's in that breeze.
That's exactly it.
Because the spirit is so strong. I mean, we have to admit, like when the body dies, that spirit is so strong, it can't just die. It
Yeah.
has to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And whether you believe in heaven or afterlife or rebirth or reincarnation, whatever your belief system is,
Hmm.
the common thread through all of it is that it's still there.
We interrupt this podcast for a dirty moment.
My dirty moment is being an overweight gay male. And within the gay community, there are various kind of gradations of gays. There are the kind of very buff gays, and then there are the guys that are called bears, who are bigger or hairy and more kind of zoftig. And even within that group, there's kind of a pecking order. And when I was young, I didn't fit into any one of those. I was a chubby guy that wasn't hairy, that wasn't really a bear, but also certainly wasn't one of the muscle guys. So I never found my place in even my small gay community, and it's taken me years to kind of break through that mold. And my message to anybody out there in the gay community is, hey, we're all alike underneath our exterior. So don't make anybody feel less than because of their shape.
And I saw an
And
excellent quote the other day that was explaining each religion, faith, belief system. And then underneath it said, not one of them is debating whether or not it exists. So everybody's searching for it, everybody's seen it or named it, but no one's denying its existence. And I thought that is so good. That is so true. Um, we're all in agreement on that one thing. It exists. And I think that's huge. I think that's huge. Um, so after this story, what happens after this when you realize that, hey, this is actually working, it's healing people? Take me through how did like writing the story for yourself, taking it, because I know writing a story, I always say to people, writing a story is easy. Marketing, wow. And marketing something that people don't really want to buy. But then when they have that pivotal experience that you had, all of a sudden go, oh, I need something. And I need one for everyone in my family. This will be something that'll help us through. So how did you feel taking it from that little drawer in your bedroom and then bringing it to life?
it was just, it felt like my life's mission.
Mm.
And it's a kind of hackneyed trite statement to say if I touch just one life, it
Yeah.
makes it all worthwhile. But there's a truth to that.
Oh,
The
yeah.
reason that is a hackneyed statement is that there's a core truth to that, which is that feeling you get when you hear that phone call from someone that says you changed our life,
Yeah.
is just so powerful and is profoundly priceless. I mean, you can't put a price tag on it, and all the sweat and investment that I made in publishing those books have paid off in those letters and those notes and those photographs and stories. I after the Uvalde, I don't know if you're in Canada, so the
Yeah.
Uvalde, Texas school massacre. When all those gorgeous elementary school children were killed in a shooting. It's the scourge of the United States. These gun issues and school killings. I didn't know what to do to process my own grief over that, but I had this book that I'd written. So I bundled up a box of those books and sent it, just put a note in it and sent it to the library in Uvalde, Texas,
Yeah.
saying, I hope this helps.
Yeah.
Weeks went, a month, and I get a phone call from a number I didn't recognize, but it said Uvalde, Texas. And I'm like, oh! And it was the librarian.
Mm.
And she said, Darryl, we got 4,000 book donations after the killing. An outpouring of so many people wanting to do something.
Yeah.
Yours was the one book about grief. And we were able to put that in each of the family's hands.
Nice.
And if I'd done nothing else other than that, would that not be enough? I mean,
Yep.
knowing that I was able to touch those families in that way was just
Yeah.
priceless. So, and I have lots of other stories, not that intense, but just beautiful stories where it really helps someone reframe their grief. And that led me to, wow, what other stories are in me that might touch a life, that might process my pain, and in doing so, help someone else understand theirs and maybe begin the journey to process theirs.
And
So
you,
that was the inspiration for the next book, which was Chubby the Bear's Big Choice.
and I think like just to go back to that, like you say, if I can just touch one person's life, I always say nobody gets into this field to become a millionaire. No, not happening. You come for that reason, for that exact reason. Like that one person you hit, it is so life changing and so impactful to who you are that you're like, I need to continue to do this. I need to. And it changes who you are. And I always say, find my people, because if I could jump through the screen and hug you, I would, because that's my people, right? Like, my people are those people who are like, look what I did. And it's not to say, hey, I did it for me. It's to say, hey, I get it. I may not understand fully, but that pain of grief is so hard that, you're not alone. And that's all I want to say to you is you're not alone. Um, and yeah.
I have to say one other story, which I didn't even understand
Hmm.
what might be an outcome of processing this book because I was a child when I wrote it and it was kind of written for children. People are giving it to their elders
Yeah.
in nursing homes to help them
Yeah.
take the bridge. And I'm going to start tearing up because when I got that phone call that a woman had given it to her father who was in the end of days,
Yeah.
and that it helped him have some relief knowing that his family
Yeah.
could find him after he passed
Yeah.
in the spirit around us, in the trees and in the clouds. I never even thought of that as a potential kind of quote unquote audience for the book, but how beautiful.
Yeah. Man, that is beautiful.
We forget that grief has many forms and it affects everybody differently. And to grieve your own existence and your own passing
Yeah.
is the ultimate end of the journey for grief. And I can't help but remember my father then passed just 2 years ago.
Hmm.
And we had the blessing of having him on a FaceTime from the hospital just before he passed. And my sister was with him holding his hand this time. My eldest sister Pam was able to be with him. But we were on FaceTime, my husband and I,
Hmm.
3,000 miles away. And my dad looked at us through the phone and just said, "I'm so happy that you have George and you have George's family." He said, "That gives me such joy that you have family."
Yeah.
And those were his last words. And he said, "I love you" to George and I. And, a, a 93-year-old man in rural Pennsylvania to have embraced his gay son.
Yeah.
He embraced me as soon as I came out 28 at age 28, but to have embraced his gay son and told his gay son-in-law that he loved them and he was proud of them and that he was happy that we had family. How touching is that? And I know in my heart that that gave him peace
Yes. Yeah.
as some of his parting.
And in his way.
And I just I don't know. I'm a softie, so these things are so meaningful to me, and I think these are the stories that we need.
Yeah.
These are
And I
the
think
handles that we need to hold on to.
exactly. And I really believe that when Kubler-Ross came out with her stages of grief, that was stages of grief for the dying. So when we go through her stages, for your father, one of his last things is having that acceptance. And, what a gift on his deathbed to be able to say, I not only accept I'm dying, I accept you for who you are fully. And then to be able to be at peace. But when we take, and society has done this, which they've taken Kubler-Ross's stages of grief and layered them over the living. And now the living are sitting here going, well, I'm waiting to get to acceptance because I want to go to the stage. And that doesn't work when you're alive. You don't get to do stages of grief. You get to do integration of grief. So you're going to revisit guilt. You're going to revisit happiness. You're going to revisit loneliness. And it's going to spin like a pinwheel. And we have this idea in our head, well, I'm going to get to acceptance because that's what Kubler-Ross says. That's what all the grief gurus are backing up now. And it feels like they're just getting on a bandwagon to say, this is how it is because it gives them popularity or whatever. But really, it doesn't work that way because you never really hit acceptance. Who the hell wants to accept that somebody they loved has died and never coming back?
Right.
That is too hard to accept that your mind, body, and spirit do not want to accept that you will never see that person again. But it does want to accept that that person lives on, like you say, in the clouds. It gives them the ability to connect and integrate those emotions and different areas or levels, however you want to call them, that you're going to experience. And all those different emotions are going to come and go, and they're just going to come and go throughout your day. And you will learn how to integrate, process, and understand that. And I think that's what I so love about the book, The Story of Tree and Cloud, that it's taking weather. And that's what I use with my pinwheel. I say, here's a pinwheel. Now think about the weather as life. And some days it's really stormy and you're spinning. Some days it's not. It's really sunny and you're sitting on happiness. And then you feel guilty for being happy. And then, it might be slightly windy. It might rain that day, but that's really what it is. And that connection, I think, for people really grounds them and really brings them healing. So I can see how elderly people would want it on their last days. And I can see how that would bring somebody to a place of, okay, I'm okay with this. I can do
Right.
this now. Um,
I believe memory is a gift as well. You
mm,
know, the romantic poets of the 1800s talked about it as well. So it's not my idea, but I believe memory is a gift and it's given to us with honor, to honor people, to honor things in the past, and to keep them alive in us. And it's if we frame it appropriately. I always write in my sympathy cards, I hope that your sadness is soon replaced by happy memories, because that is, I think, the goal for processing grief.
yeah, I do too. And that brings them back. So take me into this second book. because it is grief, but it's really on a different perspective, which I really like the topic you're tackling here. So share what kind of brought this about.
Well, and I think, I think you know that I wrote these books not in cartoon fashion. They're illustrated like real nature.
Hmm.
They're written for not just, not, they don't rhyme. They're not stories with just a few words. They are written stories for young or old. And that was purposeful. There's an old brand called Baby Einstein that allowed your babies to listen to classical music. And I was always touched by that because I know that babies are these little sponges, and children learn. They listen and learn, and whether you think that they're picking those words up or not, they are. And I wanted to write stories that were told almost like adults, so that they could start to hear these words and start to understand these concepts at the earliest age, because I think it sticks with you. And that's my core belief from a kind of a writing and educator standpoint, although I'm not an educator, to be clear. But I had another story in me, and everybody says, if you're a writer, tell your story. So I went back to that core truth, which was, what is that other story that might and I had been in years of therapy issues. As an older person who's been up and down, 100 pounds at a time, I just, on this roller coaster of weight loss and, this kind of treadmill of life, trying to get to a self that I didn't know what I was chasing. And what I realized through therapy and through self-help and other kind of work that I did on myself was that all of this was plagued by this inner child that was bullied as a kid. That chubby child that was bullied, and for bullying from inside the house in some cases, not that they were doing it to be mean to me, but even my siblings, my brothers, teased me about my weight. And, that stuff sticks with you. And what I didn't know until maybe age 58, sadly, was that inner chubby child needed healing,
Yeah.
and that bullying needed to be addressed. So I wrote this story called Chubby the Bear's Big Choice about that inner child who was a young gay boy, knew he was different, was fat, being bullied by, friends, institutions like the elementary school nurse who made us, write our weight on the poster in the classroom. Just ridiculous things that probably don't happen anymore. But I had to shed this. So I wrote this story about this very introverted, chubby boy who found only his solace by swinging up in the tree in his swing and being literally above the fray of his cohort on the ground that teased him mercilessly.
Yeah.
Chubby befriends up in the air, befriends birds and bees and other animals that don't tease him. And he becomes friends with the bees. The bees show him how to find honey. So one of his core skills beyond swinging up in the trees is his ability to find honey, because he's befriended the bees. So that plot point sets in motion a big choice that he has. He's being teased by his fellow bear cubs because of his size, and he has a choice. Am I going to fight back? Am I going to retreat to my swing and never hang out with those bears again? Or am I going to teach them a lesson? And teaching a lesson can take a lot of different forms. And Chubby kind of goes right to the precipice of being vindictive, but he shows restraint, and he shows emotional maturity that was imparted on him by his other friends, an older beaver and an older raccoon who helped share lessons with him. And one of my favorite things is a little Easter egg that I put in there. I was blessed when I was growing up that my grandmother lived in a mother-in-law suite in our house. So, the door to my bedroom actually locked, but it went into her apartment. So how blessed to have your
Oh yeah.
grandmother living literally next door to
Yeah.
you. And she and I were so, so close. And she was close with our entire family. And I remember my sister, who I'm very close to, was sitting playing in the piano. And grandmother was a great pianist, never had piano lessons, but could play by ear and play almost anything. Just a real gift. And my sister was plunking out music, and grandma came, and the piano was in my bedroom, which just ties all this together. So grandma came over to my sister and patted her on the back and says, "We all have our strengths, dear." It was kind of patronizing, but a core truth in that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, you love music, you have other strengths. And she was a great teacher. My sister became a great teacher. She was a great actress, and she also played piano beautifully too, ultimately. But the truth in that statement always touched me, so I had to put that phrase in the book, just to kind of impart some of that wisdom of my family for future generations. So
I love that.
that wisdom is
Yeah.
a thread that comes out in the end, and I won't reveal the
Yeah.
whole story. And this is a book in three parts. It's not a 700 word children's story. And I had so many publishers say, "Wow, it's a beautiful story, but it's just too long." And I'm there, well, it's as long as it needs to be.
Yeah. Exactly. And well, you said so much in there. So I'm going to take you back to um really back in the day in high school and things like that. That was exactly it. Like we look at it now as that's what we used to do, but when I'll have people and they'll say, well, I was abused or bullied, and I'll say, what generation, like what year were you born in? When were you? And they'll say 70s, 80s. Oh, we were all. And then they go, what? That's the way society was. I remember phys ed class. They put us all in a room and said, get changed. And, it was all girls, but
Humiliating.
yeah, like what if your body isn't perfect? What if it's not, and you're uncomfortable with that and you're having to do that? But that's what they did back then.
Christine, for boys gym class, we're going to play two teams. Your shirts, your skins. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, yeah, I do.
And I was fat. I had,
Yep,
breasts. I mean, I was this chubby, chunky
yep,
thing. I could barely run, much less
yep.
play without my shirt on. It was just a lesson in humiliation. And I call that institutionalized
Hmm.
bullying.
Yep.
Just
And
like
that,
that school nurse that made a first grader stand up, and she made us stand up in line by our side. So it was me and two of my friends at the end of the line all through elementary school, every class, and she wrote our weight and our height on the poster that was kept in the classroom. I mean, it's
yeah.
institutionalized bullying.
And you
The
just,
president, the president in the U.S. We had the president's physical fitness test.
mhm.
That was, like, I guess, President Nixon's big idea in the 70s, that everybody would take a fitness test. So every year we had to run a mile and get timed. We had to be able to climb a rope.
Oh my God.
I don't even remember what the other there was like three or four things that they documented what
Yeah,
your mile time was. And me and
yeah,
the other chubby guys, we were walking that mile and stopping to throw up. It was
yeah,
like
yep. And that is,
unbelievable.
and I think people, when you hit like our age, like I'm 52, and that inner child is coming up. And a lot of my friends, a lot of people that are listening today, that that's coming up now. Our children are gone. We're at this age where, retirement is starting to become closer and closer. And you start going, yeah, what was my life like? And these were experiences we had as children, and we tend to want to go, well, that's the way life was, who cares? But they impact us so much that it really impacts our decisions today. It impacts who we are today. And instead of just slowing ourselves down and going, the world was wrong. That was so wrong what those people did. And did they mean it? No. They had no idea what they were really doing. They thought they were doing something good for you. But in in hindsight, it was horrible, horrible. That's why we stop it, right?
What ties this story together? My mother. I remember before her death, sitting around a dinner table, telling her that story about the school nurse.
Mm,
And she was very active in the PTA. I think she was president when I was in the elementary school. She was just irate when she heard me say that. She goes, "Why didn't you come home and tell us this?" She goes,
yeah,
"I would have changed that. I
yeah,
would have made them stop." And we didn't have the words, the language, or the permission to have those types of conversations.
yeah,
So again, back to the purpose behind this book. If this story, if a mom or a dad reading it to a son or a daughter
hmm,
gives them permission to feel,
yeah,
give them words to articulate how they're feeling about their body,
yeah,
or that they might be in the wrong body.
yeah,
I was also, and this is not a theme of the book,
hmm,
but I also grew up a gay child,
hmm,
and there were no words in the 70s
yeah,
to put behind those feelings. God bless children today. They have a lot. They have still many things to many hurdles to face in
hmm,
being an LGBTQ child, but it is a much more open place to deal with those topics because it's just part of the pop culture, and there was nothing back then. So again, if my book can help provide access to some of these feelings and the ability for families to talk about them, I think that's where the healing starts. And it doesn't need to wait till we're 52 to
yeah.
start processing them. It can
And I
start when
think
they're
the one
10.
thing, though, that the book does take too is it takes fear away, that you can talk. This is okay to talk about. It's okay to express how you feel in your body, because it's really not a topic. You really don't know how to approach it either. So I feel like the chubby bear, is a bee charmer. He's charming all the bees and getting his honey, and I love that concept of it. And even as an adult, as I shared that I love this coat, that, I had reviewed all this and then went shopping and was with two people who kind of looked at me and said, "You're going to buy that coat?" And I was like, "I am." And I put it on. And at first, it was like, oh, it's kind of, and then I thought, I really like it. But I was hesitant to be myself. And I've noticed as I age, I'm like, well, I like vibrant colors. I'm a 6 foot redhead. Like, you can't really hide, guys. So after I decided, you know what? I'm buying the coat.
A
But
gorgeous coat it is.
it is, and it's fuzzy. But I guess what I'm asking, and a lot of you that are listening right now, if you had that option to go into a store and purchase something, if you had brought two friends with you and they were like, I don't know, would you still buy the coat? Would you still do it? And I have to say, as a teenager or a young adult, I wouldn't have done it. I would have went no. And, I loved what you said when I shared this story with you when we first got on, was that I decided I was buying the coat. And as I walked out, one friend says, I'd wear the coat if I could pull it off. And I'm like, wait a minute, that means you like the coat. And then the other person picks it up and puts it on and walks. And I think, well, you like it too. And that concept of feeling okay in your body and accepting who you are and being able to dress like that and really be proud of who you are, that is even hard to get at 52. That's hard. And I think your book, bringing that insight to youth, is a phenomenal idea.
And to
And
put words, again, to put very hackneyed, trite words to the theme of that, it's living well is the best revenge.
so true. So true. Being able to be who you are and enjoying who you are and embracing who you are. Um, so true. But I do, out to my listeners, I do pose that question to you, and you guys can put it in the chat or reach out and let me know. Like, would you make the choice to purchase something to wear if people that were with you didn't like it? Would you still do it? It's an interesting thing because I think it's an inner child fight. I think it's like the fuzzy bear going, do I do it? Do I not do it? Do I go here? So in all this, do you have like, um, I'm wondering if you have anything you promote or raise. Obviously, we're going to say the website. Um, but is there any cause or anything that you're up for?
Well, I am, as a gay male, married, I try to live my life by paying it forward. So I have been out since 28. I never went, and I believe that it is still one of the challenges we face in the world is the embracing of diversity of all stripes, but particularly among the LGBTQ plus community, not just in the North America, but around the world where it's even harder to live openly. So I encourage any of our listeners to donate. If you are also inclined to believe in those causes, to donate to the Trevor Project, which helps kids that are considering suicide because of this. And too often, sadly, the choice they make is to not just retreat, but to choose death over what they see as an insurmountable battle. So if you can get your head around that concept, the Trevor Project is just one beautiful organization to help LGBTQ youth who are questioning their role and their place in this world. And I think to me, nothing could be sadder. And I'm blessed that I had a family that embraced me. Even when they didn't know what was inside of me, they still loved me unconditionally. And that's just not the truth for so many people out there. And it makes me so sad. So I encourage everybody also to tell their story.
So true.
Because in telling your story, just like your coat story, you will have touched a person, maybe 20 people, maybe 200 people. And in doing that, you have changed their life in a small way. Call it the butterfly effect, call it what you want. Your stories mean something. Now, as you know, I run an advertising agency with my husband. I 30 years ran a global PR firm, Citizen Relations, and I'm still chair emeritus of that firm. But my husband and I, after the pandemic, started our own small business. And, I'm McCullough, he's Griffin. Our firm is McGriffin Media. He's at the kitchen table, I'm in the office. It's a beautiful, small family business, but we're doing great things. But at the core of everything we do is telling an authentic story.
Yeah.
Whether it's telling a celebrity's story on social media, helping them tell their story on Instagram or TikTok, or whether we're helping a big brand tell their story in an authentic way. That's at the core of what we do, and that's what the core of what I've always done in my business. So I believe in the power of message, and the message can touch people. It can make them something. It can make them change their worldview. It can help them process grief. It can help them find and heal that inner child that they didn't know needed healing.
Yeah.
And
And I
again,
think,
I hope it doesn't take someone to age 58 to know that they have to heal that inner chubby child.
yeah. But that's why you're here, so that we don't have to get to 58 or 68 or
Let
52.
me be the cautionary tale.
Yeah, like, and I think that is such a message to be heard, that everyone's story matters. Like your grief story matters. And the impact it can have on others is huge. And, I'm not sure if you ever did find a publisher for your book or if you chose self-publishing. Um, but
Publish.
either way, it's hitting people. And in today's day and age, it can hit the masses. Even simply a blog, if you wanted a blog or you just wanted to write your story, it impacts people. It really does. I love that.
And
I
I think
love
back to grief, they've also had to grief that inner gay child. As we
Yep.
were talking before this discussion, you know, I was that child, that gay child that didn't come out till 28.
Yep.
I didn't have the ability to take my boyfriend to the prom.
That's right.
I wasn't able to hold hands with the boy that I was smitten with in eighth grade.
Yeah.
or to pass love notes in sixth grade,
Yeah.
or to do the little finger game
Pick
with
one.
who was I up in the tree kissing?
Yeah, exactly. And
You
I,
know, so you have to grieve those things too.
yeah.
It's interesting, and I'm going to plug another book that's really changed my life. I ran a major business for 25 years as CEO and chairman. And there's this book for business people
Hmm.
called Transitions, and it's written by William Bridges.
Okay.
And you're going to love this, Christine, because he uses the Kubler-Ross
Uh-huh.
method for companies and businesses to process major changes.
That's a good one. Yeah.
His philosophy is that if your company is selling to a new company, or if your company is going through layoffs or whatever that kind of major change, and you're going to come out the end of at something very different, that you have to grieve
Yeah.
that loss at the beginning. And if you shortcut that and go right to, hey, we've sold the company, we're now 5 times as large. If you never grieve the loss of that small company that was that family-owned business that got sold, you're going to be in a world of hurt later on. So again, there's such wisdom in grief processing at every level,
Yeah.
and it's been used now in business too. So I encourage any of you that are listening that might be in a business, to pick up that book.
Yeah.
It's a real seminal piece of literature.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, and I think that's so true that people dismiss the grief that's there on a daily basis, which is work, is which self-acceptance, all of this stuff, that we really have to be able to grieve this and move forward. I was dyslexic, always in the special learning disability class, never really was fully accepted. And it took me years to go, this is who I am and this is my purpose. And once you find it, whew, the world soars. You
You can
just,
turn that into your superpower. Look at
oh yeah.
Cher.
So
Cher
yeah,
talks Cher talks openly about turning her dyslexia into her music and her music writing
yeah,
and making it her superpower. And she's won an Oscar.
yeah,
And she talked about not being able to memorize screenplay,
yeah.
dialogue because of her dyslexia, but look, she turned it into a superpower.
And that's exactly it. I think you just have to look at those things and go, this is who I am, and this is my superpower. It makes me stand out and be a little different the way I do things and process things. I just absolutely love you. I love the
Likewise.
message that you have. Oh, so much, so much. So if love to put all these links and books at the end. So don't worry. I'm going to put them all within the write-up of this episode so that all of you can reach out. More than welcome to reach out to you. What's your website? Say your website for me.
My name, Darryl R. McCullough, DarylMcCullough.com will be the book website. And then if you're interested in the business, McGriffin Media, McGriffin Media.com.
Perfect. And again, we'll put those all at the end. Is there anything else you'd like to extend to our listeners or say?
I just wish everybody the best, in processing whatever they're working through, and know that you're not alone, and know that sharing that story with at least one other person can open a world of healing.
So good, so good. And on that note, thank you all for tuning in today. And as usual, it is only together that we grieve, and it is only together that we heal. Take care, everybody. Grief Uprooted professional grief and empowerment coaching are not to be used as a substitute for professional advice by legal, medical, financial, business, spiritual, or other qualified professionals. All our products and services are designed for grief empowerment through learning and sharing of one's lived experiences.